All right, guys, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you very much for joining us today for Talent Views Webinar Wednesdays. And our topic for today is next level sourcing strategies. And I have a super powerhouse of speakers and panelists for today. This is something that we try to do to help our HR community just learn and evolve as we're going through this crisis together. And I'll jump very quickly into it. I want to introduce our powerhouse panel today, and we're just going to start. So our first panelist is the Vice President of Recruitment for Taskus in Southeast Asia, and she leads the company recruitment operations in the region, responsible for massive staffing needs. I'll let her explain what massive means later on. And she spent most of her career in the US and returned to the Philippines to launch a major international bank in 2011. Since then, our panelist has led various recruitment teams in retail, banking, and outsourcing. She joined Taskus 4 years ago, growing the company from 4,000 employees to 18,000 in the entire Southeast Asian region. And she's also a graduate of the University of the Philippines, Visayas, and Iloilo. Carmela, welcome to Webinar Wednesdays.
Thanks for having me, Ange, and I'm just really pleased to be here representing Taskus and looking forward to such a very exciting discussion with our panelists. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Carmela. Our next panelist is the Global Chief People Officer for Coca-Cola Bottling Investments Group, and is concurrently the Vice President and Chief People Officer of Coca-Cola in the Philippines. He sits in the global HR leadership team, of the Coca-Cola Company, and is also in the senior leadership team of the Coca-Cola Bottling Investments Group, responsible for about 45,000 associates and 800 HR professionals across all Coca-Cola owned bottlers around the world. So Drew, welcome to Webinar Wednesdays. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me as well. I hope that everyone is keeping safe with your families, and I hope you're enjoying this time if you are working at home. I hope you're taking advantage of this time with your family, friends, if ever. So yeah, I'm just happy to be here, happy to be connected. Once again, thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. Thank you, Drew. And our final panelist is Ice Mangkoy, Chief HR Officer and Head of Corporate Services for CIMB Bank in the Philippines, and also the Chief Human Resources Officer for CIMB Bangkok Capital Investment Banking. Prior to joining CIMB, Ice was the CHRO for SLK Global Solutions, a technology and business support services company co-owned by one of the largest banks in the USA, Fifth Third Bank. She was appointed as board director owing to her achievement in setting up the business from ground up in the Philippines. So Ice, thank you for joining us and welcome to Talent Views Webinar Wednesdays.
Thanks for having me, Ange. I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you to all of the attendees as well. And I gained a new contact and friend, Carmela and Joyce, on the discussion for today. So looking forward to that.
Amazing. So we're all connected on LinkedIn one way or another, but everyone in our audience is really lucky to have this powerhouse panel and just to share all these insights from industries such as yours, right? So before we get started and before I jump into the questions, I just wanted to say hi to everyone joining us today. We've got people coming from all over the region, Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia joining us today. And I wanted to brief you on your panel. So on the screen, you'll see, of course, your panelists. And on the left, you have the bios of our panelists today. We've also put in some resources there for you to download. So if there's anything you want to learn more about recruitment, managing through crisis, there are downloads on your resources list. We'll also give you a copy of whatever slides can be made available to the audience after the presentation, as well as a recording of this video 24 hours after the webinar. All right. And of course, the most important part, and I do encourage our audience to ask, there is a Q&A section on the right side of your panel. So please feel free to just throw these questions to us, and our producers will push these questions to our panel and see how much we can answer in the next 45 minutes or so. All right. So we'll start already, and I'll just put this panel discussion slide up. But as we move along, our panelists have prepared some slides that you'll also be able to see. I'll start with Carmela. With this crisis, with everything going on, with the volume of people that you're having to deal with, tell us your story, Carmela. How is it like to make that adjustment for TaskUs?
Well, thanks for the question. Ako talaga nauna ha. So in any case, I think the story of TaskUs is probably representative of a lot of organizations that we kind of thought that, there's a crisis happening, but nobody really seemed to maybe realize that it's going to happen very fast. So I think what really worked for TaskUs is we have leaders that are very decisive. And if you caught the TaskUs hashtag, it's people before profits. That really is it's ingrained in our culture. So it was very easy to pivot. But I'm sure that week where we all had to make decisions, every leader can identify on having to make decisions about asking their team to come in or to leave early or send people home when business is impacted. Those are very real decisions that leaders have to make every day, but more so that week where in the Philippines it was declared, right? So I think people sometimes want to hedge their bets and they really want to, I think, remain in the status quo. I think our experience in TaskUs is that it was a very clear mandate to make sure that we put our people first, to put them in a situation where they had to commute and to have them stuck in, the Philippines and Manila especially is known for traffic, right? And to have people commute, that was one of the, I think the big factors that allowed our leaders to be very decisive. I think every company has some experience of that day and then the following, I think, 3 to 5 days. So if I may, I think we even have a quick, do I just push to audience? Does that work?
Yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead.
No, does that show? Can everybody see that? I'm not sure. We're also adjusting to this kind of, I think, technology. So we're showing kind of a timeline. For TaskUs, it was really quick. A decision was made to stay home. And I think what was unique to TaskUs, and there's very few companies that were able to do that, we trusted our employees with equipment. And that's hard for businesses to do, right? How do you give PCs to thousands of employees, right? And the first instinct of business is, documentation. How do you get people to sign off on the risk, right? And then can we get the equipment back? I think what was unique to TaskUs is that we were very confident with the types of people that we hired into the organization. It's a very strict hiring process. And, we're talking about sourcing here. So from where we actually tap our talent, it's almost like a 10% conversion. So it's really filtered in a way where, character, integrity is very, very important to the organization. So a lot of companies, I'm sure, can identify with that. But pretty much with TaskUs, we made a decision to send equipment home to our employees. And that's not easy to do when you've got over 18,000 employees. So that was across the globe, US, India, Taiwan, and in the Philippines with various sites.
Awesome. So it was really about getting them enabled from where they are.
Absolutely. And I think especially in the BPO industry where we're supporting frontline industries in the US primarily, and I'm sure that that's true globally, you can service your clients when people have equipment at home. And I'm sure companies also had a setup where people had to come into work, but that actually put people, I think, in danger, right? Because people were unsure. So, people have a decision to make. Do I go into work or do I not? And we really decided that we didn't want to put people in that crossroads where they have to decide between safety and earning an income.
Correct. Thank you, Carmela. Let's go to Drew. Drew, was that the same concern? Was it getting people enabled very quickly? How was the setup for Coca-Cola? What were the adjustments and challenges that you guys had to go through?
First and foremost, when the country was locking down in the Philippines, I was in the Middle East. So
Wow.
I tried,
That's tough.
and I was supposed to stay there for a bit longer. So the first job to be done was to get myself in the first flight out to come to the Philippines. Because if I don't take that flight, because the length of the flight, I would probably be locked out. I mean, I'm sure there will be ways, but during that time, we didn't know, right, what was happening. Um, and that was very challenging, and it a bit exciting, if you may. It felt like an amazing race, being an
Right.
amazing race. But I've managed to get back home to the Philippines, and I was happy to be home. And I think the biggest challenge for me was that we have around 45,000 associates, plus more, if you count in our direct associates, that we want to ensure that we look after their health, well-being, and safety during this time. And we operate with a lot of countries. I mean, that's one. And as you can see how challenging it for the government also to figure out what is the appropriate policy, or what is the, what steps are they going to take? Are they going to do an enhanced quarantine? What would be the policies required from the associate, etc. So every country that we were operating in, the government, some governments are very prepared, some are not quite prepared, and some are confused. And as an essential goods company, and probably for some markets, one of the biggest companies operating, we needed to work very closely with them to figure that out moving forward. And I think what I realized in a situation, because we have experienced getting positive cases outside the Philippines too, and when that happens, it was very, very, very challenging. And you learn as you go, because you're never prepared for that moment. So what I realized there is that you can't be dependent on what the government is mandating. You have to ensure that the standards of safety that you promote is something that you're absolutely comfortable. And I can look at the eyes of our associates, and I can honestly tell them that I am doing absolutely everything. I'm sorry, not me, but the entire leadership team is doing everything to ensure the safety of our associates we operate. And I think what's interesting also is the idea that it's everyone's responsibility. And I think as we move forward and as we challenge also the future of work, everyone has a role to play in this new normal that we're going to have. And I don't know if you can show the first slide that I've shared. We're lucky that we have actually launched our, what we call it, Life at Coke. This is the employee experience wheel that we try to curate in Coca-Cola across all our countries. And we just launched it before COVID-19, but it's so relevant because it just showcases that, in difficult times like this, you need to be people first. You need to embrace that people first mindset. And you're not doing it for the government, you're not doing it for the company, but you're doing it to absolutely everyone, because we're all human beings and we all have needs. And it also, being a part, challenges how you recognize, challenges how you connect, how do you develop people, and how do you value and inspire people during this times. And we're not built for that. Our leaders, although they are strong, probably some of them have never experienced a situation like this. So it is our responsibility. If you're hitting with thousands and thousands of people, you need to kind of curate and guide that approach. And I think this wheel actually united all of us. So when I hear stories of people connecting against all odds, people ensuring that everyone is valued and included, even though we're not necessarily physically together, I find that very, very inspirational. Happy that it's happening.
Absolutely.
It hasn't been easy, but we're coping and we're learning as we go.
Right. That's a really great message. This is the new normal, that's for sure. And you're right. We can't wait on governments. Government will do their part, but we can also start doing our part already and look at the resources that we have. So I wanted to go to Ice from CIMB. Banking is so crazy. It's obviously counted as one of those essentials. So it must have been a different set of challenges bringing an entire banking system into the households and homes of everybody that's working for CIMB. So Ice, tell us your story.
Okay, so I'm hearing from the other two. I think definitely we have a very unique situation. It's been a productive, admittedly tiring period, and so we activated a 100% work from home arrangement within 24 hours from the government's implementation of the community quarantine.
Debated.
So I guess yes, I guess the silver lining is we have learned a lot from this experience, and it's basically tested the resilience of our people in our process. So luckily, we are still at the startup phase. So all folks were ready, very agile, and can quickly adapt. What we have done is we have basically started a stress test when we were setting up the company. So we played out all worst scenarios well in advance. We just didn't expect that we would get tested this early. So to date, we are the only bank in the Philippines that currently operate at full BAU capacity with 100% work from home arrangement. So not the typical for traditional banks, but the intent has always been to disrupt. So even at crisis mode, we wanted to really disrupt the industry. My only challenge now, really, thinking now, is my employees want to go back to the office. Since they've started experiencing work from home, since they started working from home, they thought, I myself thought, it's going to be a great thing to do every day in pajamas, but everyone wants to go back to the office.
Right. So that's a happy problem. I'll call that a happy problem because, people are slowly seeing the pros and cons of work from home. Right. So let's jump into talent acquisition. Everyone here is really approaching talent acquisition and hiring in very unique ways. And I'll go back and continue on with Carmela and just ask, how's recruitment like? As someone who's leading recruitment in the region for all your hiring needs now, I know you were telling me that hiring is even at a higher peak now during this crisis, Carmela.
Yes, that's true. And I think the main change for us was we had to really make decisions on how our hiring process needs to change, the scripting, how we pull people has become virtually digital. How we process people are in the Philippines. It's primarily by phone with a lot of email infrastructure around that. So that's why it's so important for applicants, if you're looking for a job right now, that you have to have a strong internet connection, because that's kind of the primary lifeline for everybody. The main change for TaskUs primarily is even our recruiters had to change, right? They had to change how they think, how they manage candidates. I think we've always taken a huge pride in how we treat our candidates. We have open reviews in our Facebook pages, and we really take to heart comments from candidates. And, we decline a lot of people in this industry. So the big pivot for recruitment and the big changes we've had to do was to change ourselves, right? Recruiters had to be equipped. We had to give laptops to every recruiter, where in every organization, there's some of us that have laptops, but there's a big majority that come to the office and use the office equipment. So the big change for recruiters themselves was to adjust to the new norm, the new working hours even, right? And the platforms. And we're inundated by, I think, just a bigger amount of applicants. And how do you maintain your culture and your belief system to take care of every applicant when the ratio have gone drastically bigger? Even the scripting and how we follow through with people and how you describe hiring process. We can all agree that an interview on a face-to-face is so different than, and recruiters make decisions on, there's a science and an art, right, to recruiting and sourcing. But a lot of that recruiters, I'm sure, will agree that they make the decision oftentimes with how they feel about the conversation. So now it's become digital. And what do you do with decision making about making a job offer when you haven't seen the applicant, when you've relied primarily just on an audio or by a phone conversation with intermittent disturbances, right? With the roosters and the babies crying, right? And family disruption. So that's all. And I really would want to compliment recruiters across, all the geos and everybody that is represented in this webinar. From whatever geo, I'm sure every recruiter has had to adjust very drastically and very, very quickly. So that they can do the right thing. Recruiters, we're like matchmakers. We're trying to just match jobs to people. And so people had to, I think recruiters had to adjust very, very quickly on the new scripts, the speed of the decision making, and how that decision is being made.
Right. Is that the same case for ICE? I know banking, you guys are, pride yourselves in a lot of the modern technologies that other banks or traditional banks don't have yet. So in your own recruitment, in your own hiring, has that changed quite similarly from what Carmela described?
Well, for us, I guess technology-wise, we don't have any problems because obviously we have aligned our process and our solutions to the DNA of the organization as a digital bank. I guess the only challenge is really once you tap the talent, you have to address certain, feelings of securing stability. So this is something that you have to really prove to the talents that you are pursuing. So at this point during crisis, people are hard to trust organizations because we see, large organizations putting some recession efforts and not really hiring. So it's really reinventing the way you attract. So the communication, the storytelling that comes with sourcing, it's really the focus that we have worked on, making it more personalized, really advertising the brand to make sure that people perceive it as a very stable organization. But of course, that's coupled with the technology or the digital solutions that comes in order for you to facilitate this during crisis.
Right. So for your team, has there been a big adjustment as well in how they're recruiting and how they're adjusting to this new normal?
I guess there was a very limited impact to the current team that's sourcing because we're coming from a phase wherein it's really a startup, and so the speed that's required and also the uniqueness of how you attract talent is really has been set at the very onset. And what I told my team is that what I've told my team is that at this point during crisis, do not even look at other reference on how you can attract talent. There is no such thing as a benchmark at this point. You are your own benchmark, and so you have to create innovative ways for you to pursue candidates. But again, going back, I think it's important that you are supported with a certain budget. So that's one, and I guess we will be discussing that later. And also the right technology to facilitate this efficiently for the employees that's really handling recruitment.
That's an absolutely good challenge and message for everyone in HR listening to us today. You are your own benchmark for sure, because you have limited resources, limited time, limited capacity, depending on what your organization provides you. And so you can't just keep comparing yourself to others and not work. You really have to get the ball rolling yourself. That's a great advice, Ice. Drew, just wanted to ask from an FMCG standpoint, how's recruitment like at this time?
Maybe I'll step back a little bit and share. I'm sure you guys are seeing a lot of this in the news and also from your networks. So there's a lot of companies that are really scaling down from recruitment. There's also a lot of companies that are even going through massive layoffs, right? Because I think that's the situation. I mean, we can't dance around the fact that the challenge that every company is going through, especially during this time. But I think one specific action that we have done is to ensure to protect jobs of our people. And in fact, it was our mandate to ensure that we deliver merit increases, the same amount that we have budgeted. We have ensured we provide all the necessary support that our associates deserve. And I think that's very critical, and therefore it gives a lot of pressure to ensure it, and we thrive as a business. Because at the end of the day, when you recruit, you want to position yourself as a sustainable company, as a company that will sustain such crisis. You also want to position yourself as a safe company, as a flexible company, or as a people-first company, like what I shared earlier. Because I think people who are finding jobs now will be very critical. Is this, especially for those people who are moving companies, right? Is this company sustainable? First question. Will this work put me at risk, my personal safety, or will this give me flexible arrangements that I'm enjoying now? So I think we need to make sure that we clean up internally so that when we hire people, we are the company that people will choose. But what's really interesting for me in terms of recruitment is that this crisis has also become a very good reflection point for us as a company. Understand what are those critical emerging roles that probably we have thought of before but never really took the time or really invested in it, because just like what Carmela was saying, we've really thought about work from home, but not really. But now we're doing it suddenly in a record 7 days, right? But it's the same for us. We talked about e-commerce as a channel. We talked about employee experience as a profession in HR. We talk about digital HR in HR, and so on and so forth. And now more than ever, we're realizing there are job titles that never existed before that we're now creating and will soon be opening up. Because if we're going to prioritize vacancies, we're going to choose these vacancies because the world will change. So I imagine that's the shift that I'm going to foresee. There will be new jobs created, exciting jobs created, and I think we need to ensure that our people will have the right capability to do that. So I think that's exciting, and we're looking at that, and I'm sure other companies are looking at that as well.
Awesome. All right, so I'll open the floor, I'll open the panel, and just ask, what are the effective sourcing strategies right now? Drew talked about potentially new roles that are maybe starting to emerge. How do you find these talents? Where do you look for them? Do you look inward? Do you look outward? What's our message going to be like for the HR leaders listening to us today? Anyone?
I'll take that one. I think it's important for.
Okay, Carmela, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure Drew's got some great ideas. I love what he said so far. I think it's so important that people stay tuned to what's happening in the news, to self-reflect, to see if their skills are up to par. As what Drew has mentioned, there's some roles that you might find what you might perceive as a very stable company, but there are certain roles within stable companies that might, have lost the importance of the value of that role, right? So just as there are some startups that have very critical roles, so I think it's also important for people to think about that. The old way kasi is to look for stable companies. I think that is a big lie. There's no such thing as a stable job. I don't think people really want to stay in a job for a lifetime. I think you want to pursue a job that fills your passion. And so the messaging for companies is to show different stories of different critical roles that they have that serve that purpose, that serve that passion, right? So that's why I think that even the panel was saying earlier that the good stories to tell, and I think, Ange, you had a very good post in LinkedIn about what works in terms of messaging. What do people find interesting in terms of content? I think that's what's important. But going back to my point, I think in the new millennium kind of workforce, people should not really even look for, a job of a lifetime. I don't think that that's really the goal. The goal is to provide avenues for purpose and passion. And a lot of companies do better at that than others. And I think that that's kind of the shift, right? In terms of the sourcing also.
Right.
So I'm sure you
So
guys
what
have
I'm hearing
plenty.
from you, Carmela, is you have to tell your story well. So it's not just about finding the talent that has the skill that you're looking for, but are you also the company that people are looking for? Are you a company that has purpose and passion and provides a lot of these opportunities to them, is what you're saying. So that's interesting. It's two parts. A lot of recruiters would often just trouble themselves with, where do I find the talent? Versus the mindset where, how can I be that company that talent wants to find, right? So I saw Drew wanting to add to that, and then if Ice wants to add after, let's go ahead. So Drew?
So first, I would recommend the HR folks here to review your recruitment spend or talent acquisition budget so far, and will give you a lot of data on where you're really spending and whether are they the right channels or the right spend bucket you should be spending on. I think that's a good starting point. I imagine recruitment in the future will be very, very low touch. So you need to check. I mean, one of the things, very basic, but one of the things that I'm really looking at is, how do we do health check, the pre-employment health check in situations like this. And we're partnering with our suppliers to understand how would that work moving forward. I really think assessment will be very, very, Carmela's point, you'll be hiring people that you would never meet. How do you get to a point that you are really, really comfortable with the hiring decision you're going to do? And therefore, there might be certain tools that you may need to have to complement the interview. Because there are a lot of cues that you will not see. Usually there's the physical cues that you can find when you're sourcing on a face-to-face engagement. So assessment plays a critical role. And for you to do that very well, you need to be very clear with what you're looking for. And that's usually the most difficult one, being clear with what you're looking for, company and as hiring leader. And finally, to Carmela's point, I just want to echo that employer brand, very, very critical. At the end of the day, if you have a very strong employer brand, they will come to you. You don't need to look for them actively, but they will come to you. And is there?
I think her screen froze.
Yeah. So maybe Ange, while waiting for Ange Ice, maybe you could.
It's your turn, guys.
Okay.
Tell us what you think.
Okay, well, I agree with you, Drew and Carmela. Absolutely agree on staying true to the brand. I think at this point, you have to reinvent as an HR. You have to be an effective marketer and invest on storytelling and educating applicants. Let the brand do the work. I guess it comes hand in hand, right? Putting in the effort to create sourcing strategies, but also leveraging on the actual brand itself will provide you a better pool of quality candidates. I also want to touch on the governance requirements. I think Drew has mentioned earlier, how do you facilitate certain assessments and even medical checks, right? So that's one of the things that in the financial sector is very important. And in fact, governance really starts with us sourcing for talents. And so realization coming into this crisis period is really to evaluate how you can adhere still to the governance requirements, such as for background checking, regulatory compliance, and medical checks, without compromising the speed or the demand for the talent. And probably the last bit that I would like to share is, again, I constantly echo the need for fresh technology. So because I really feel for the recruiters, right? It does not change. Even at this point when you are in a crisis, it's important for you to equip the recruiters in order for them to really source effectively. So virtual recruitment, AI applicant mining, or video job posting to make it more creative and to really, attract talents. I think these are like really essentials.
Yep, and I think what the challenge will be in the next few months for us is because budgets will be constrained as we try to, I think, adjust to the new economics, right? So I think that, I'm sure all of us will have to take a look at our budgets, and then how do you balance that with having to purchase services and technology? Those aren't cheap either, right? So
Agree.
some difficulties have to be made.
Absolutely agree. In fact, coming into this work from home, seeing obviously the impact to the economy, when you get into the management meeting, the first thing that they will discuss is basically cost, right? Because obviously what we do is the hard part, and then we are now pressed to combine the hard or the people aspect of our role while supporting the business as a business partner in managing costs. So that's absolutely one of the realized challenges during this time.
All right. Thank you for that, Aish. And thank you, Carmela. We do have a question coming from Aboites Power, Stuart Abansho. How do you address the critical pre-employment requirements now, like pre-employment med checks and NBI? So Drew was talking earlier that was a struggle for them. How do you do medical checks? So how does that work for everyone in the panel? Feel free to weigh in.
I can go first, I guess. For Taskus, we've actually waived the pre-medical checkups. So those are on hold because the clinic partners that we have can't really accommodate them, and we're hiring hundreds of people per week. We have gone on to actually retain the background checks. So those are still ongoing. You have to give your vendor partners a heads up of the type of volume that you're expecting. That's kind of basics of these kind of partnerships, right? And so it's business as usual when it comes to background checks. And I think we've added on some checks like reference checks because we're giving equipment out to people. And we're slowing it down when we're, I think, checking for identity. So it's making sure that we've got the people that say who they say they are. There you go. How about you, Drew?
Okay.
No, we're the same. I mean, during the peak of the quarantine, we had to delay the check. At the end of the day, some people are in a probationary period of meditating, and that's fine. But that's not going to be a sustainable option. So what we're doing now is we're discussing with other partners as to whether, as you select the partners you work with, I think the capability that they offer you, the capabilities that you were looking before, they're not necessarily the same anymore. So probably it needs to be flexible. There would be multiple sites. They should have a level of technology. And as you can imagine, some of the partners that probably you're working with at the moment will not be able to have that. So it's really a partnership. We're working with them. We're giving feedback. We're also figuring out what is the right approach moving forward. Do we have more clinics in the sites? To check there as well. Can we do that ourselves too? I mean, we don't have answers to this, but those are the things that we're currently exploring. Government, I saw the question on NBI also. I can imagine the government also need to pivot. And I can see some great movement happening. I think they're realizing too. This is a huge social experiment, not just for the people of the Philippines, but also for the government. So I'm happy in a way because I imagine the services would also improve moving forward. And if it's a problem in one company, I can imagine it's a problem for everyone.
Absolutely. And adding to the testing, right, we have another question question coming in from Rog Mariano asking us, how about COVID-19 testing? Is that something that's on your mind as HR leaders and as part of the pre-employment check now? Feel free to weigh in. I'll take Drew first. Go ahead, Drew.
There's a huge conversation on testing, and we're also having a conversation on whether shall we do testing, not for pre-employment, testing period. And I know there's a lot of other companies who are thinking about that too. I think the bigger question and challenge there is that it needs to be orchestrated with the government, because at the end of the day, the Department of Health need to have all the data to be able to make the appropriate decisions in the government, or the government can make the appropriate decisions based on the data that they will get. If a certain group of companies starts their own testing and it's not possible, that might be detrimental to the beat. Now, some people may challenge that thinking. I'm hearing that there is an ongoing broader debate in the Philippines, and hopefully it will be resolved soon, because I agree testing is important. Well, if you ask my opinion, I don't think COVID-19 is a prerequisite whether you can be hired or not. You can pass that test, and 1 week later you get COVID-19. And therefore, for me, it's, you know what I mean? So for me, it's not a pre-employment question. I think it's a much bigger question that we should take upon us, and not just as a pre-employment.
That's a good point. Probably Ice, you wanted to, Carmela? Go ahead.
Okay,
no, go ahead, Ice.
Okay, thanks, Carmela. I agree with Drew. It's not a pre-employment matter. It's more of an occupational safety and health effort. So I think reading the news, there is a House Bill 6623, which is the new normal for the workplace and Public Spaces Act for 2020. This being reviewed currently, and it touched on, there was one segment there that talks about providing an opportunity to test all employees, but it's purely optional. So even the government thinks that this is not a mandatory thing, but in lieu of having a mandatory COVID-19 testing, it's important for you to also address all the occupational safety and health efforts that's being presented through that House Bill 6623. So it's a 17-pager, but I think as early as now, before it gets released, I suggest all HR professionals in the Philippines start reviewing it, because it basically prepares you not just for the COVID-specific crisis, but all types of crisis related to health. So yeah, so I guess that's just my point, Ange.
Yep.
I agree.
Awesome. I can see Carmela smiling. Go ahead.
Oh, no problem. I agree with the point of view that Drew and Ice had put forward on the pre-employment, I think, stage. What we have done as a company is actually made COVID testing available to employees as part of the medical benefits that they're entitled to. That's a decision that we had to make earlier on. I think that that's important. But, the requiring it on the pre-employment stage, is a big conversation. And what do you do when people test positive and when they test negative, right? Sometimes it's a false,
absolutely,
it's a false assurance, right?
You can't test them every 14 days, right? So
yeah, but also I'm a little bit bothered
of travel, I guess.
Yeah, and Ange, I think, for me, the controversy, another thing that I have is, in the U.S., kasi we don't do pre-employment because, we're really trying to get away from, biases, right? And
yes,
on the pre-employment stage on medical information. Yeah. And so the Philippines, we really have this practice of, pre-employment medical testing, where sometimes, bad decisions are being made, not on the qualifications of the person, right? But on some, sometimes archaic kind of, I call it like old belief systems on people being eliminated from the pool, right? Because they're
absolutely
not quite healthy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then you really see those differences coming up, country to country, how they're approaching. So there's a question that just came in on the candidate side. How are candidates feeling now? What's the pulse that you're getting? Are they excited to apply? Are they more cautious about are there new questions that they're opening up because of the crisis that we're going through? What's your experience? I'll start with Drew this time.
That's a very tough question because people are very different. So I have a few experiences where it's a little bit tentative because, of course, they don't know even what's going to happen to their personal household, more considering a full job change. But it goes to the other end of the spectrum, wherein it made them reflect about their life overall, and they're like, now is the time for change,
Seize the moment, seize the day,
seize
right?
the moment. And so we have that, and I find it very interesting because when you connect with people online, some are not really comfortable having interviews or phone calls from home, and some struggle with the internet connection, probably because for those people never really spent time at home. They're always in the office. They didn't need a strong internet connection. There's a lot of struggle, but I think what's true is that people are considering change, because I think in life, when you get the taste of something that is very, very different from what you're used to, it makes you think. And I can imagine there's more people thinking like that at the moment and very open for new opportunities. And when I say new opportunities, it doesn't have to be new companies. It could be a new type of a role. And also people are remember I shared the people experience wheel. I think it also takes into consideration that everyone has a different requirement in life. They have different needs. And I think times like this, especially when it's life-threatening, people start to realize, what do I really value in life? Type of a question.
Absolutely.
And therefore they start asking, am I getting that in my current work arrangement or not? And it's time to change. So it's happening. I think you just need to be patient because I've had interviews where we had to do it 3 times because the connection was very poor. More so, you can't even talk to the person face to face. And yet the connection is poor. We had to resort to a phone call, which is not see the person. It's a struggle. You just need to be patient and try. What else you can do?
Right. So it's also changing us as HR, right? The traits that we have to call out from ourselves, sort of because of this new situation. Yeah, Carmela, you wanted to add?
Sure. And what I thought I would also say is we are seeing a diversity of applicants coming into the pool, right? And just a shout out to some of tenured executives, people that haven't even interviewed in quite a while that may have lost their jobs. We're seeing a few of those in our pool. And so there has to be, I think, a mind shift also in the approach there. Because if you're a more experienced executive and you haven't interviewed in quite a while, you're going to have to really level up your game. You're going to have to really understand that, while we value experience, there's a lot more to it, right? So it's never like you're entitled to a role. So we're seeing some of that happening now. And what's interesting is there's actually more collaboration in our industry with even hospitality industries that are trying to connect with us and partner with us to give us a window into their employees, to allow their employees to work short term with us while they kind of ride the wave. We've never seen that before, and we welcome it because we want to be able to connect jobs to people that that need it, right? So we're seeing more of that. Whereas before, in the old, that seems so long ago, but that was just 2 months ago. The market was very competitive. We all had to kind of compete with each other on the pool, and so that's kind of what we're seeing in the market now.
Right, and that's interesting. That's a totally brand new source. It's companies that have a struggle at this point, who sort of lending their people you and pick up some of the work that you guys are that you guys are offering. So that's really interesting as a source. Yeah.
Yeah,
I see you wanted on that as well. How are candidates feeling and how are they responding to your hiring right now?
So currently, Ange, if I'm gonna be like filtering all of the candidates we've interviewed so far, the common theme is that they're just looking at two core factors. One is stability, and the other one is employee experience. So as early as during interview, they will start asking you how did you treat your employees during this crisis. They're more curious now on the medical coverage for dependents, not even for themselves. But I guess one advice I could give to HR that's really managing talent acquisition is to personalize the discussion. I feel that as a professional, you have a responsibility to also help candidates make the right decision. Just because you need a certain talent doesn't mean that you will do everything to get the talent. If you feel that the decision of a certain candidate is just based out of, I got scared, I wanted to run away from my current organization, maybe you're more fun or something like that. It happens, yeah. Right? I see your post, I think you're fun there, so I will apply. It shouldn't be the case. Because at the end of the day, in the future, once everything settles in, it's going to become an attrition, or probably the person will not be even as a good performer as you expect them to be. So it's more of, so again, aside from being a marketer, you also have to be like a site person. You have to really make sure that whoever you're interviewing really wants the job, okay, despite the current situation. So yeah.
Right. And that's interesting. We talk about our multiple hats, right? We're a psychologist, we're a marketer. Right now, what I'm hearing from you is we're also a guidance counselor in a way that we're helping a candidate understand company for them. So one of my last questions is on metrics. So I'll jump back and circle around to Carmela. Have the metrics changed? Now that you're hiring in this time of crisis, now that you're massively looking for new opportunities, have the metrics changed for you? What are you measuring in HR now?
It has a lot, but I think in Taskus we've always, I think, taken to task ourselves on candidate management. So we measure that by the reviews that we get, our Glassdoor rating, the type of reviews that are coming in. The time to fill is kind of wonky, right? And I don't know how else to explain that because it's fast, right? We're having to fill up roles very, very quickly. And these are critical roles that you have to build a pipeline on. I think what we're also measuring is our ability to hire very quickly based on the pool that we have. So if I connect to our ability to do backgrounds, because it takes longer, I think it's very good to measure yourselves, like how far ahead are you in terms of hiring? Are you 3 weeks ahead? Are you 2 weeks ahead? Or are you behind, right? Because when you're behind, then the different decisions are made. So those are kind of the metrics that we've had to change and pivot to just make sure.
All right, cool. Drew, any metrics that stand out for you as you're working on experience?
Actually, the metrics are the same for me. Maybe the context or the standard varies, like still business, top line, bottom line. Also ensuring that your people mentioned labor costs, which the recruitment costs and etc. So attrition is still the same. In fact, actually, we just recently done a pulse survey. We did thousands and thousands of people, and we got a very high engagement. We were surprised also at 92%.
Congratulations.
And a 94% approval rating for our COVID-19 response. And, it's just very interesting because it's comforting that, we're doing the right thing. I think you need to look into why you're looking for metrics. I think the metrics should be because I think the situation now is that the world is evolving so fast. And therefore, the targets that you set may not be wise to do it on an annual basis, but you do it on a much, what do you call this, shorter basis, 3 months or every month, even.
Right.
Because
Having
if
a
the situation,
timeline is what you're saying.
the situation could change and you can pivot moving forward. And then you look at metrics as an opportunity for you to get feedback. I think the entire psychological approach toward metrics should change. But I just want to identify 2 things that for me that will dramatically change, and I put it as a target for us. One is some sort of approval on the total rewards offering that we have as a company. You hear weird stories wherein people are asking, so do you guys cover internet connection at home, or do you cover electricity bills at home because you're working at home, etc.? But as you can imagine, maybe some benefits are no longer relevant, but there are new benefits that are emerging. So I think that needs to have some sort of metrics to see how we're going to evolve. And I think the second one that I wanted to highlight, similar to the other one I said, the performance management. I think now more than ever, an evolved performance management on a much frequent basis, moving away from a rating system. This is the time to be able to do that, because the more we are apart, and this is also some questions that I receive from candidates wherein they ask, so how do you measure success? How am I evaluated? And, of course, these are questions that will be asked because the situations are not the same. In the Philippines, typically, you need to see the person 9 to 5 to say, oh, this person is performing, right? Because we're not even really open to work from home in the past. So for me, new metrics and performance management would emerge.
And that's a great insight that you shared about pivoting. Now is it's not optional to pivot. It is mandatory to pivot and really look at how do you measure success. So Ice, you wanted to add to that as well? Any metrics that stand out for CIM at this point?
Okay, well, I think constantly throughout the whole conversation, we've talked about candidate experience or overall employee experience. I think that should be primal in terms of recruitment metrics. But I guess second to that would be time to hire. So I guess the overall speed to hire and onboarding is very critical during this period. So because obviously there is a demand to support the BAU whilst deploying unique ways to onboard fast. But again, I want to caution everyone to really ensure that we do it fast, but accurately and within allowable process, because you want to veer away from attrition or audit backlash once everything settles in. And I guess the third and surprisingly during this crisis, I find it as the least priority in terms of metrics is cost per hire. My take is you should avoid at all costs a knee-jerk response to pressures on cost cutting. There should be a strategy, and it must impact your urgent requirements, like the usual ad hoc administrative requirements. But you need to have a solid strategy. So this way, you're managing your cost decisions at present, and it will help determine how you will be able to sustain performance during and after the crisis. So tying everything together, the 3 things, we must capture short-term productivity wins to immediately address the spend reduction, the hiring requirements, but you also have to address or realize the risk associated with it in order for you to come up with the best cost decisions. End of the day, HR should be, primarily protected in order for them to support the employee experience and productivity that's expected from them.
Right. Amazing. So I'm hearing employee experience. Do not compromise on that. When it comes to budget, of course, it will always be important, but look at it in terms of how it's aligned to strategy. So strategy must come first before we even think of budget and managing that entire financial aspect. Awesome. Guys, it's so fast, we're into it 1 hour already and we didn't even feel that. One last request I saw on Q&A is that someone's requesting for that bill that you mentioned, Ice. So maybe we can take that offline. I'm gonna make a final call for our audience to pick up any other questions that they have with our powerhouse panel today. And I'm going to give them one last round for their closing message, anything that they want to share when it comes to how their practices are evolving, any message they want to give to our HR leadership community. All right, so I'm not seeing any other questions. If I may start with Carmela, what's your message? How do we adjust to this new normal that you've shared with us today?
I think my advice for everyone is to change quickly, adapt very quickly. It's not as scary because we're all in it together, right? So you look to your family, your friends, your coworkers for support. I think everybody's going through the same thing. This is the World War III, and this is the 9/11 of our times. And I think we're coming out of it very well. I think there's some very resilient people out there. So, just you have to look to yourself to be strong enough and to help and to contribute. I think if you do it as a service to others and make sure that you're every day that when you wake up, there's a purpose, right? That you're trying to make sure that as recruiters, we're trying to help people find jobs. I think you can't go wrong with that. So I appreciate being part of this panel. We could go for 2 or 3 more sessions, I'm sure. Some very talented group on the panels, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Carmela. Drew, I'll shift over to you. Final words for our HR leadership community.
Yeah, so thank you, everyone. I know this is a very challenging time for all of us. But I imagine also it's calling the HR function to truly step up. And I think as an HR professional, may it be recruitment or other facets of HR, I think we can truly make a difference, not just to the business, but also to people, their lives and their safety and their well-being, but also to the community at large. So I think we play a very, very important role during this period. And don't quote me, I know this is being recorded, but I think HR is definitely the coolest job.
I have to agree. Sorry for the bias. Sorry, but not sorry.
I know. But it is. And I think, when I look back within the last month and a half, 99% of the things that we have done, I wasn't really sure with what we were doing. And I think the reality now is that there's no longer expertise in anything. We learn as we go, and we need to be humble, that we go into something not knowing everything. So for me, the community, this network is very important. So very happy to stay connected. I mean, I am personally also learning, and I would love to learn from the best practices from the other companies that are doing. If you have questions, please feel free to connect. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. If you guys have questions, want to share some stuff, please.
Thank you so much, Drew. And Ice, please go ahead and share your final message and at least some of the learnings that you've had picked up over the past couple of months during this challenging time.
Okay, I think, Ange, thank you. First, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to be part of this session today. Hearing from Carmela, from Drew, and even from you, I think I have something to share again to my team for them to continuously be inspired. But going to that particular effort of talking to my team, I want to all of the people who's watching this, first, I want everyone to acknowledge that you're also an employee and a citizen. So it's Mental Health Month, and the role of HR is to really deliver, support the business, make sure that people are generally happy and satisfied. But it's a thankless job. We've heard that so many times, and this is the best time for you to also evaluate yourself, evaluate your mental and emotional state, because that will highly impact the way you would support the business and the people. I guess my second advice is from the new normal, because there's the common theme, right? Even the House bill that I've mentioned, it starts with new normal. But I guess it's time for everyone to now quickly shift from new normal to now normal, accepting the reality that this will go on, this could happen again. And so we shouldn't feel that it's a temporary thing. We have to already start accepting and adopting to the change and say that the change is already here. It's now normal for us. Do not be afraid to test, disrupt, and innovate. I think that's very important. Don't be afraid that you will be making a mistake. Because as I've said earlier during the start of the conversation, we are our own benchmark. No one can tell you that, hey, you're not doing the right thing, because no one has experienced this before. No one has experienced a government making a drastic decision affecting the entire organization or the entire country even. So yeah, it's okay. At this point, you are still allowed to test and make mistakes and just learn from it quickly and create that benchmark for future organizations. And like what Drew mentioned, I'm also on LinkedIn. You can add me, and you can also reach out to me for any quick topic discussion or advice. Thank you.
That is awesome. Thank you, Ice. So again, please add us all on LinkedIn. So you've got Carmela Saiz from Taskas, Drew Fernandez from Coca-Cola, and Ice Mangkoy from CIMB. Thank you so much, everyone. I do have some final notes before you go. So the webinar recording, just wanted to let you know that a copy will be made available to all of you in the next 24 hours. There are additional resources as well. You can download in the resource list box on the left of your screen. And we would very much appreciate if you can provide us feedback so we know how we can do better for our next webinar Wednesdays. So again, thank you so much to everyone that's joined us today, whether you're a panelist or audience or even our producers on the back end who have been supporting us throughout the start of the discussions for this webinar. Thank you again so much to everyone. I do see you, whether it's in our next Talent View webinar Wednesdays or in our LinkedIn and social media channels. Thank you again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your week. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.